Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Coach Drink, the Missouri Tigers continue to make some noise in the transfer portal, landing the commitment from former Florida Gator defensive lineman Chris McClellan. And Dill, there's a funny story regarding the boys in the history around Chris McClellan. 2 years ago, we were doing a little Oregon State prep, getting ready to do a game breakdown. We were watching the bowl game, Florida, Oregon State, and Dill shoots me a text. This number 7 cap for the Florida Gators is going to be special. That was Chris McClellan. Now, the story of Chris McClellan, first 2 years at Florida, a guy that flashes elite talent on that defensive line, hasn't quite put it together yet. And you want to know why I love the fit with the Missouri Tigers. There hasn't been many programs across the country that have been better in the player development aspect than the Missouri Tigers. You give him an extremely talented defensive lineman with all the tools to be a great defensive lineman in the SEC. Now he goes to a program that he can get developed, where that development really wasn't happening with the Florida Gators. If you're a Missouri fan, you have to feel really excited about landing a guy like Chris McClellan, and more importantly, what Coach Drink is doing in the transfer portal. Going to get into Chris McClellan, talked a little bit about what this Missouri program is doing in the transfer portal. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. This has been a program that's been a blast to talk about the last 6 months, especially the last couple of weeks in the transfer portal. The amount of support you guys have shown the boys has been absolutely amazing. Cannot thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dylan, I'm going to kick this one off to you. Chris McClellan heading to Missouri. How we feeling?
I mean, I think you make a good point when you think like Chris McClellan. You got a guy with the tools, but at Florida, there is no ifs, ands, or buts about why that defensive line coach got fired. There's a bunch of guys on Florida who I think have some of that talent that you kind of talk of. And you look at what Eli Drinkwitz has done in terms of building this Missouri team up. He has not really done it by totally cranking up the recruiting. And they're getting better recruiting for sure. But if you see how he's bridged the gap now for these 4 years against teams like Georgia and everyone else in the SEC, he's doing it by getting guys better. I mean, within that program, they're building, they're getting developed into guys who are punching kind of above their weight in terms of what their recruiting says. So to me, it's like that's a perfect fit for a guy like a Chris McClellan who's looking like, man, I'm good. I know I can be really good. I know I can be a top day 1, day 2 kind of draft pick. I need to be in a system that works better.
And that's what excites you most if you're a Missouri fan right now, is the fact that Coach Drink has been outperforming what he's done on the recruiting trail. But the last 6 months, obviously, landing a guy like Williams-Nwaneri, looking at how they finished out that 2024 high school class, and then looking in the transfer portal, this is how programs take that step, right? You have proven that you're a very strong player development program. Now you kind of start convincing guys on the recruiting trail. This is a program where you can come not only get developed into an elite player, but compete for SEC championships. So now you're combining high-level recruiting with player development. That's how this program takes that next step. And they're talking about or speaking of taking that next step, this is a Missouri program that they're getting aggressive in the transfer portal, because I do get the sense that within that program, they kind of sense that in 2024, that next step might be taken on the football field as well.
And frankly, I think Ole Miss is getting a lot of the attention for what they've done. I'm not sure Missouri's that far behind, if at all. Frankly, I think Mizzou might have been a better team last year. And you look at some of the portal acquisitions they've made. I mean, a couple of the real top dogs. Chris McClellan added there. Obviously, Caden Green, Torino Pride from Clemson. Like, these guys are studs. It's like, this is going to be a really, really good team. They had a great offense. They're bringing in a bunch of guys who I think will make this defense better. Yeah, this is kind of like what we talked with Ole Miss. Like, that's going to be a really exciting year next year. I think for Mizzou, you're kind of in a similar situation where you kind of look, you've been bridging the gap already, and now you're kind of putting the talent that's kind of closer to what on paper you have at Georgia, Alabama.
It's funny. I feel like Missouri is just taking the Rock Boys all transfer portal team. Like Torino Pride, our guy. Caden Green, our guy. Chris McClellan, our guy. I mean, it's like the guys that we really liked in the transfer portal, Coach Trink grabbing them, bringing them in this program. And let's talk a little Chris McClellan real quick. He's a guy that, again, the consistency hasn't always been there, but the flashes of dominance have been there since he's been a true freshman. And he's that kind of body that you want. You look at how Missouri talked about gap closing I mean, Brady Cook, Luther Burden, they have the skill talent to be really good. Where do you want to continue to get better at in terms of knocking off Alabama or knocking off Georgia? It's along the line of scrimmage, right? And they go out in the transfer portal and land the number one tackle available in Caden Green, who has a tremendously bright future. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they did a really good job last year in the portal addressing the trenches. Now they go out and get a guy like Chris McClellan, 6'3", 320. And that's the kind of body you want in the SEC. And again, what excites you the most, untapped potential. And this is a guy that has extremely powerful hands, a great get off for someone who's 320 pounds. You see those flashes. Now you just need to see it more consistently on a snap by snap basis. If he puts that together, I mean, he's going to be turning a lot of heads for Missouri in 2024, no doubt about it.
Well, because you mentioned it. I mean, the way he plays when he's playing really well, like being able to use that lower center of gravity on guys, getting leverage, blowing guys back. But you're right. You just see that's probably 10 to 20% of the plays you kind of see from him. In the others, like kind of that other 80% or so it's just not good enough. And it hasn't been good enough at Florida. But again, you know, the talent's there. And again, in Mizzou's just getting that out of guys. I don't know how they're doing it.
I'll tell you how they're doing it. Coach Drink building that culture. I mean, that's like the first step. You look at how programs continue to build. I mean, it starts with getting that culture, getting that player development set, and then starting to win games. And then when you start winning games, then you can recruit at a higher level. And then when you combine the culture, the player development, and then recruiting at a high level, I mean, that's what you're seeing with this Missouri Tigers team. That's why they're going in the right direction. Dill, Chris McClellan, great addition. Taking a look at this Missouri class in the transfer portal, I mean, dynamite, right? Torino Pride, a guy that we kind of pegged as a true freshman as being a potential first-round NFL draft pick, struggled with injuries at Clemson second year, obviously was recruited by Brent Venables, so he wanted a little bit of a change of scenery. Missouri lands a guy that kind of replaces a guy like Chris Abrams-Drains in a big way. Torino Pride, all SEC caliber dude. You look at a guy like Marcus Carroll coming from Georgia State. I mean, Missouri's had a lot of success recruiting the running back position from that group of 5 or Division II level. Marcus Carroll coming in, going to be a productive running back. Caden Green, the number one offensive tackle available in the portal. Every single Power 5 team wanted someone like him. You go get a Georgia guy off on the edge rusher, Darius Smith, high school prospect that, again, looking for that development. And then a veteran linebacker in Corey Flack, who's probably a day one starter for this Missouri team as they usher out a couple experienced linebackers.
Right there, you look at like 4 guys, especially Pride, Green, Smith, and McClellan now, who, I mean, have ultra high talent. Like they have the talent to be whatever I think they want to be, frankly, in football, whether that's college and frankly, whether that's the pros. All 4 should be there. That's like the interesting part, man. If they can get something out of each of these guys and bring kind of that talent to the forefront and display it more consistently, like that's the type of thing. I mean, he did it last year. I will say, I thought, and if he does it again, like you're looking at a Mizzou team that's gonna be really tough.
And we said this heading into Missouri, like last year, like what made Missouri so, like, why were we high? And I'll put my hand out, first one to admit it. I wasn't 10-2 high on Missouri. I was higher than most people on Missouri. I wasn't necessarily 10-2 high. Coach Drink blew those expectations out of the water. But why were we so high on Missouri? Their roster construction so complete. Like you look up and down in that depth chart and say, I don't see a hole in this roster, right? I mean, they had a solid offensive line, really good in the trenches on really both sides of the football. Obviously, quarterback play was phenomenal with Cook, Luther Burden. The one thing that we might have maybe holding them back in terms of taking that next step is where your difference makers. You had Luther Burden. Schrader, I think, was a difference maker towards the end of the year for sure. Brady Cook, I think you could argue as well, but they were maybe lacking some premier NFL talent difference makers. A guy like Torino Pride, a guy like Caden Green, a guy that I think we both think Chris McClellan can be. Those are the difference makers that can help you take that next step. And let's be honest, there's only one other step to be taken. That's taking down a team like Georgia, being a top team in the SEC. And you look at this Missouri program heading into 2024. I mean, this is a team that's going to be extremely tough out for every team in the SEC next year.
Yeah, I mean, they're right there. And you kind of mentioned it. Like, there isn't that much higher for them to go. It's pretty much, if you're going to advance from this year, you got to beat Georgia. And that's like the challenge. And I think they're getting closer and closer and closer. They've been doing it for 4 years now. Let's see what year 5 brings.
Yeah, and the margins are getting smaller, right? Like you're looking for that 1%, and a guy like Chris McClellan could bring that. A guy like Caden Green certainly brings that. A guy like Torino Pride certainly brings that. If you're a Missouri fan, I mean, you have to be fired up about what's happening in the transfer portal. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a few more names pop for Missouri, because I think they're looking at this roster, looking at how the 2024 season sets up and says, this could be a special year. And we want to make sure that we have the firepower to go in and make some noise in 2024. Ride the momentum.
I'm sure guys in the portal are going to be looking at this roster, say like, this is close. Like, I can come here and be part of something special.
100%. I mean, look at Torino Pride, Caden Green, Chris McClellan. Chris McClellan that offers Auburn, Arkansas, Oregon. I mean, all over the country, these guys were sought after, and they come to Columbia, Missouri. It's a really exciting time. Again, Missouri fans, you guys have shown a ton of love to the boys, a team and program that we're excited to talk about in the next couple of weeks and months. Appreciate y'all rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.